Hey guys. Yeah, that was so. Yeah, my name's Dale. I started studying at the AIE about 5 6 years ago, and started making a game in my advanced diploma of games in my second year, which was Orbiter, and I've been working on it ever since. Um, IOAE. I was teaching second year games, but I recently left to move up to Noosa, and now I'm teaching online. So I'm still working for AIE, just sort of team basically, which is pretty cool. So I've been working on this game. You guys are welcome to go check it out. There's a demo and stuff to download. Blair will be able to show you where that is, but it's steens.co. And what I wanted to show you today was some particle stuff, which is something that I use a lot of in Orbiter or pretty much any game that I kind of work on. And that's because particles are just really flexible, and there's lots of cool stuff really easy to use in your game. And I'll kind of show you, just really, I just want to go through and show you some of the stuff you can do with them rather than how to actually get them to show up in your game. So I'm sure Blair and the guys will be able to show you how to bring them into your level with them, and hopefully we've got a program in there that can show you how to instantiate them when something happens in your game. And my recommendation is pretty much anytime something happens, just instantiate like have a little spot there to instantiate a particle, whether you kind of end up or not, is my advice to the programmers, so that anyone that's kind of doing any of the art or the technical stuff can just kind of stick some particles in there and sort of use. So what particles are really good for is feedback for what the player and things in the game are doing. So like you can make little fires and smoke trails and that kind of stuff, but what I find they're really good for is whenever you hit something, whenever you interact with something, whenever an enemy does something or the level does something, you can nearly always do something with particles. And the good thing is that they're actually really cheap, because even though they're spitting out a lot of mesh, they're actually they do this thing that's called batching, and they kind of, instead of calculating each individual thing sort of by themselves, they tend to sort of calculate almost as one, but they're much cheaper than if you try to do the same thing by hand. So I just wanted to show you, I've got a basic, I might try and slow this playback speed down so you guys can see it a bit better. So here you can see I'm in the scene view, and I've got a particle. And does everyone know how to create a particle system? Yes, no? Okay. Okay, cool. So I've created a particle system, and it's being spawned from a cone shape, and doing it in the scene view. And you can see I've got the simulation thing here, so I can stop it, I can re-simulate it, I can pause it, and then around and take a look at it if I want. At it doing its thing. And there's a couple of other things I'm doing. So I've put on, so I've actually got gravity set to 1, which means that it's falling at the speed of gravity kind of as we know it, which is like 9.6 feet a second or something. And also what I'm doing is I've got like and I'm using a gradient to do that in the color over lifetime. That's a really easy thing to do, but the reason that I'm doing it, I'm going from orange to blue is so that you guys can see the age of the particles. So that's, and when you're setting up a particle system, if you color it like that before you go and do your final colors, you can actually see which particles are doing what. So if they're bouncing around all over the place and you see blue ones, then you know the blue ones are actually the oldest particles. And it helps you kind of keep track of what's doing what. And then you do your final kind of coloring later. So let's kind of have a look at, this is just a basic particle system. So the really good thing, like if you were doing this by hand, you could probably, you could animate this without too much trouble. But once you start doing things, stuff a bit more, then it would get far more difficult. So this is probably about 1,000 times faster. So I'll speed this up just a little. Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. So that's just basic system. So I've got a cone. It's basically, you can see it's flying out of a cone. I can change it to stuff like a sphere, and then it comes out of like all directions of that sphere. So if I just increase the size of that, you can see how it's coming in off the gravity, and you'll see they'll just kind of float away in all directions. And you can go in there and mess around with the shapes. They all do kind of cool different stuff. That's not terribly complex, but what I wanted to show you, if I just turn that one off, let's go and have a look at collision. So I've got pretty much the same particle system, but what I've done is added collision to it. So you can just go into the collision drop down here and then tell it to collide with world instead of planes. So you can use planes, then you actually have to tell it where the plane is. So the easiest thing is to just select world, and then it collides with everything in the world. You can also go through, if you want it to be tricky, you can use collision as well. So if you wanted to collide with some stuff, not other, you can use layers. But let's just have a look here. I'll just put that up one. See there, and that this is just in the preview, not in the game, so I can preview it all in real time. But you'll notice when I move around, they all kind of the spawner, and which can be good. Sometimes I use that, but that's because we're actually working in local space. So the particles are technically attached to the transform, like the position and the rotation of this thing. If I go to world, space, now when I turn it, oh, hold on. That's weird, maybe because I'm not playing it. I've actually noticed in my version of Unity 5 that there's some really weird things going on, so I apologize if some of this stuff doesn't work properly. Okay, that should actually simulate, like, well, now that I'm running it, it's working just fine. So once I'm in world, once the particle is created, it's then attached to the world. It's not the actual generator thing. So I can then move it around, and it will behave much more naturally, and I can get them to kind of bounce around and then do stuff. I bring that back a little, create some more stuff to collide with. See, it starts colliding with bricks. So you can make this, you can make them collide with, players, but it has to be a collider. So if like a skinned mesh, if you were animating like a character, you would have to put colliders all over them and stuff. That the particles collide with, and it kind of gets a bit complicated. But yeah, you just sort of set up colliders all over the place. So once we've got collision going, then I want the actual part react to the collision. So I do that by going down to sub-emitters, and I add in a sub-emitter and tell the other particle system to spawn when it collides with something. So when I press play, just turn it on. these will pop out, and then when they actually collide, they start spawning other particle systems. So I can do this maybe as balls that are landing on a wet surface and interacting with something like that. Or I could go to the collision tab and turn the lifetime loss up of the top particle, of the main particle. And then that'll take some lifetime away from the particle when it hits something. So if I turn that up to 1, hits something, it's just going to spawn a particle and it's going to die. So that way I can now have a particle that explodes when it thing. And I can go down to the sub-emitter and I can do things to that as well. I can increase the amount of particles that come off of it. I have to turn up the number of them. Also be really careful about bumping up the numbers on your particle systems, because that's a really good way to like lock up your entire unity, and yeah, you'll lose what you're working on. So if you're going to go and pump in any crazy numbers over like 20,000 particles, I would do that. I mean, give it a go, but you know, definitely save. It's worth a go. Now I'm not really focusing on any of the pics, so like the images that it uses. So it uses just an image, and if we're using stuff like an additive shader, then you really only need a black and white image. And you tend to put sort of black around the edges and then do your image in the middle, and black becomes transparent. If you want to use alpha blended. So, but Blair and the guys should be able to show you how to do that. But I won't sort of show you here. What I will do is at the end of the sorry, have you got a question? No. Okay, cool. So at the end, I'll show you how I use them in Orbiter, and I'll show you the level that I'm working on at the moment with some particles doing their thing. It's not finished, but you'll at least be able to see like a work in progress. How bad is the frame rate? Is it like super bad or? Okay. All right. Hold on. How's that? Okay, cool. All right. Okay. It's kind of like a splash cupboard. I mean, you can do all sorts of stuff with that. You can do sparks. So if you do sparks that kind of fly off something, and then they tend to sort of bang out little sparks. That's pretty useful. And what I'm actually doing here is like on all of these particle systems constantly. So I've got an emission and I've put the rate up. So if I put the rate up, you'll see I spawn more, becomes a bit more liquidy. But I can actually set that to 0, go to bursts and turn up bursts, and it's some out. And then we can start to do really cool randomization stuff, right? So if we go to the start speed, and it's set to all these little numbers here that have like little arrows on the right-hand side have different options. So if I go to start speed, click on the down arrow, and use random between two constants, which is between two numbers. So it's between 0 and 5. So all the particles will get some sort of random value, 0 and 5, and then they'll all kind of come out randomly. Then we can do things like add velocity over lifetime and make that a random between two constants. And then we can start doing things like giving it random directions, and they'll sort of tend to spread out. We can, yeah, what? Everything. So explosions of all sorts of types. I can use it for rain, snow. I'll show you something. I'm getting to the cool bit. I'll show you something cool in a second. But sort of going through all these little tabs here and just figuring out what they do. So just kind of messing around with them. And you can do some really cool stuff with the curves. This velocity over lifetime, instead of, say, the numbers, if I go in and put in a curve, I can then animate what they do over the lifetime curve and start sort of changing that. And you'll see that they do all sorts of weird. So now that I've got an animation curve, they kind of follow that. And if I bump that up, see, I kind of get all sorts of axes as well. So you can do it on sort of X, Y, and Z. And if you want to get really complicated, you can go to random between two curves, like giving them random positions between curves. And then they'll like pick random positions anywhere in that yellow curve. Excuse me. Okay, so let's go to the cool stuff. This is kind of my favorite stuff. So I'm just going to show you guys wind zones. So let's turn on just a particle system, and I've got a fairly long lifetime on them, and they're going way change, which shows you the lifetime and how old they are. And a wind zone. So I can create wind zones just by going to game object. I think it's 3D object, and then down a file. See, they start to get pushed by the wind. It just comes from a direction. Okay. All right. Can you hear me now? All right, cool. So I just turned on the wind zone, and then I turned up the main power, and you can see. So this is the normal particles. Just give them a sec to like back to normal. Now if I turn up the wind, you'll see they get blown away. And then as I turn the wind zone, they actually blow the particles around. So you guys can animate that. You can move it around with code. It's positioned because it's just like a constant direction, like it just comes from that direction. If you want wind that you can move around in position, you go to the wind zone and you change it from directional to spherical. So I'll turn on the spherical wind zone now. And now what we get is they're actually being attracted of the wind zone. And then I can move the wind zone around and they'll spiral and do cool stuff. I can move them through the particles to make the particles do cool stuff. You can attach wind zones to, so if the object moves through the particles, it'll actually interact with the particles. Got like settings away. If I want, I can do You. Um, I could probably spend like 4 hours on particles alone, um, showing you all the cool stuff that I can do with them. So that we're just sort of brushing the surface there. But there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with them. I'll just show you just really quickly what I'm working on. This is a level of orbiter. Hopefully, you guys can kind of see what's going on. Hold on. Yeah. All right. Let's do that. All right. So pretty much everything the orbiter does has some sort of particle happening to it. So if I go through the edge of these bubbles, there's particles going on. They'll be a bit hard for you guys to see. They lock onto this object and then rip it apart. There'll be particles coming off. Even the little pickups that I go and fly around and pick up are particles. If I go and rip this big one apart, big pickup that I have to go get is a particle, and he's surrounded by particles, and then he gives me the warp out. Yeah, and then I warp out. So yeah, like I pretty much attach a particle to almost everything I do, uh, and I guess the trick is really to make the particle convey something to the player. So what type of hit it is, what type of explosion, what type of liquid or gas or whatever you're trying to do. Um, and that's kind of where the skill comes. Easy to just drag in a particle system, but it's much harder to get it to do what you are trying to convey to the player. So ricocheting off the wall, then it's your job to make that ricochet as not only as convincing as possible, but as satisfying as possible. We want that particle system and the bullet hits that wall to just feel like look awesome and make the player like feel like they're really shooting a bullet, sci-fi bullet or whatever. More stuff that I'm kind of working on. A button is whatever. Yeah. So I've got this little this is like the little tutorial levels. I need to get this thing here. You'll see when I like orbit stuff, there's particles everywhere. I go pick up the little pickups. You give me okay. Can you guys still? Okay. I'm here. Okay. So alrighty. So being an indie, you guys just want to play around and just sort of do a hobby, then you're still an indie developer and you can still release it on websites. And there's all sorts of, like on your own website, you can do the sites you can release games on for free. And that's a really good way to go. You can really release a whole bunch of stuff. Nope, keep cutting it out. The evil Blair. Um, okay. All right, so you can just sort of practice. But yeah, you guys are indie developers now, so I mean, it technically means you're developing without the aid of like monetary funds from, say, a publisher or something. So Yeah, like 5 years. 5 years. Um, I wouldn't. Um, it would be a lot. So I think last year, last year we added up how many like it was like how much the game had actually cost us, and I think it was 1.5 to $2 million. So like if we were actually hiring people and paying ourselves all the stuff we needed to, and yeah, and that's just like a few guys making an indie game. So you can see like, but we didn't because it's just our time, and we can just work on it as much as we like. We can make the game as good or as bad as we like. We just decided to try. It's just it's actually a lot harder than you think. Yeah. As we'll see. Yeah. And that's because they're incredibly complex. A game like GTA 5 is complex, and after you've made a couple of games or even attempted like a medium game, you actually begin to wonder how they managed to get it to work. Like that level of complexity is insane. It is, and we complain about bugs and glitches, but really, it's a miracle that thing actually functions. So it's kind of amazing. There's two. There's when I put something together, or some new graphics or like a new model or something, and I put it into the game and I get to play around with it, and I actually like play through the level and I get to see that actually gives me like a really nice warm fuzzy feeling. It makes me really happy because I get to see it do all stuff. And then the second bit of that is when it's ready, giving someone else that hasn't played the game before, just giving them the controller and getting them to play, and then watch them do stuff and watch them kind of enjoy it, and get their feet. Yeah. Yep. No. No, it's coming out soon, like in a couple of months. No, it's completely different. It's completely different now. I mean, it's similar, but that no. Well, you can download the two. There's a web demo anymore if you use Chrome because Unity plugin doesn't work. So use something else. A downloadable Warp demo, which is uh, just a different type of demo. And then the new one that like the game that you'll play will be kind of like a cross between the two, but with like and we've sort of mixed things up a bit, changed things around that we didn't think really worked. So the warp gun things are gone, and the outside boundary isn't doesn't behave like that anymore. We now it's full weightless, like Newtonian physics, jumping out of giant. Yeah, so it actually feels a lot better, and this is where all the time goes into. It's like testing and playing, and then we've kind of replaced and redone a lot of stuff. We've changed like so much of this game to just try and get it to something that's super awesome for everyone, and something that will work. Um, but yeah, the two demos on the website will give you an idea of the core, but it's going to be a lot better when hopefully when you play it on game soon. Well, I'm pretty sure they're still charging people $100. So if you want to go up on Greenlight, you have to outlay $100, which isn't that bad. But I mean, if your game is like something that you did over the weekend and you don't think people will really buy into it, then maybe you want to spend the $100 on something else. Um, but it was actually a lot harder to do it when we went up. Like we went up the moment Greenlight came out, and so did a lot of other like really well-known games, and there was some awesome stuff back then, but there was a lot more of it, and it just was a lot harder to get into the top 100, and then even harder to get into the top 50. But then we finally got there once what's actually happening now started happening then, and that's when they started green lighting like 50 games at a time or 20 games at a time. And then we got pretty close. We got up to like 120 something, and then over like a month they greenlit all these games, and we just went up to about number 14. Now it's a lot easier because they greenlit in big groups. There's less quality, and so you only need something that's sort of fairly decent to get you into that top 100. Putting it up onto green, getting into the top 100's a bit harder. So you have to have something. It's not really about the process of greenlight. It's about if you've got a good game, you'll get greenlit. If your game's not particularly good, then you're going to struggle. So if you put your game up and you find that you're actually struggling, it's either something that's or it's something that people aren't really interested in, and it might be a great game, but it's just not something that kind of captures their imagination. And we struggle with that with Orbiter as well, because we don't have like, it's not a first person game. We don't have zombies or dragons, and all the things you guys really like to play. We don't have that. We have this orbiting game that kind of looks pretty and has some nice sound and stuff. But the gameplay is lost on a lot of people. Our game requires you to kind of play and learn it over, I don't know, about 20 minutes to an hour before you really get the hang of it. And that's a big ask because they've got so much choice. So yeah, like getting up in Greenlight's easy. You pay $100, you get up there. Getting Greenlight's much more difficult because you get in people's faces, and you can't just sort of rely on, you know, just putting it up on Greenlit and waiting for the magic to happen. You actually show people that it exists and lead people to Greenlight. And we were doing okay, but then when we went to Pedal, Markiplier kind of came past the booth and he played it, and then he did a let's play. I think the video's got about 900. Yep. Uh, I'd have to say Journey still. Um, yeah. Yeah, there was something else I played recently. I can't remember what the hell it was, but it was pretty awesome as well. But no, Journey's definitely the one. I don't remember what it. Thumper, man, it's like that game is freaking amazing. He's a PC, and it just blew me away. So yeah, that will probably when it comes out. And the next question. Uh, yeah, okay. So I do art and design, music. I do art direction. Uh, I'm a director of the company, so there's legal decisions and that kind of stuff. So the direction of the company, I guess I'm kind of lead artist, sort of. So if I get anyone else to work for me, I then am in charge of, and then I'm sort of producer. I kind of try and make sure that everyone's got everything they need to get the game done. And in between there, I tend to somewhere. No worries. Cheers, man. Maybe next one we'll get a better connection. Okay. See you, man.